Today we are talking to Wendy Shuff, who is a naturopath out of Kingwood, Texas, about what to do when your thyroid numbers show normal, but you don't feel normal. So let me just add. If you are on and you have questions, please feel free to comment with your questions. I do have some that came in from our followers already. Hi, thank you
Hi.
so much for joining.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
This is Wendy Shuff of Live Simply Well out of Kingwood, but she does virtual appointments as well. So anywhere that you are finding this, go over and follow her and connect with her. She is a um, natural health network provider. And so that means that you can go to naturalhealthnetwork.org and explore her directory listings and learn more. So today we've been having a lot of questions come in regarding thyroid and just women not feeling right, going to the doctor, getting blood work done, and then the blood work comes back normal, and they're sent away with no options other than to think that they're crazy.
Yeah.
And so I know that you have such great insight on this, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, why would numbers come back normal, but you're not normal?
Right. Yeah. So that is actually the most common occurrence that happens in my practice is people coming to me who are a mystery to their doctors, or are there more than a mystery, they're actually just brushed off, and or they're put on anxiety or depression medications, but they're not really ever given the answer, why did I need this to begin with? I really feel like something is off. I have all of the typical low thyroid symptoms, and I think with social media now we have the advantage and we have the disadvantage of having too much information, so we can easily convince ourselves that we have everything that everyone is talking about. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of actually testing those numbers. Um, Years ago, doctors did just treat thyroid off of symptoms, and we're learning a lot more now that there is also a reason why the thyroid was not normal to begin with. And usually those are occurring from things like deficiencies and or toxicities or both. So a most common deficiency that I see is selenium or iodine, also low iron and a low vitamin D levels. And so when those things are off, which are things that all feed the thyroid, it's incredibly easy to become imbalanced. Um, like other lab values, those numbers of the normal ranges are taken on a general population sample. And so those samples can be as few as 100 or a couple hundred or even 1,000 people. And oftentimes they're taken in the same geographical location, which means people have similar thoughts, similar toxicities in their environment, and similar food patterns. And whenever you take samples from such a small population, we're going to get lab values based on those few people. And so the lab values are very, very broad, and they're not values of where people actually feel good. They're just values of all the people that they tested from low to high.
Mhm.
And so when you go to a holistic practitioner or you are treated by somebody who has studied lab values from a holistic perspective, we tighten up those ranges a whole lot, and we actually take into consideration where people feel good, where they are optimally feeling their best, where they're no longer having symptoms. And so that is the biggest difference of how a traditional physician would look at your lab values versus a holistic practitioner, or even if it is a traditional physician, somebody that has studied more in depth about where people actually are asymptomatic or are feeling optimal. Um, and so that is what I see
So
day in and day out.
what I hear is your normal might be normal for the people that are coming in, but not normal in the sense that you're actually fine and don't have something actually going on. That's been my experience is that the normal ranges
Hmm.
aren't optimal ranges.
No.
For sure. So, you can have other underlying issues
Hmm.
like we had a question come in. I have normal hormone levels, but then their antibodies
Hmm.
numbers are high, which first of all, I don't remember my more traditional doctor ever looking at antibodies. I had to go to functional medicine for them to even check antibodies. So what would that tell you?
Yeah.
Um,
So typically, I guess backtracking just a little bit, most physicians that I see anyway that are bringing, when people are bringing me their labs and they say, look, my doctor said I'm fine. And they go, I said, well, did they run thyroid labs? Oh, yes, they did. They're running only a TSH level. That is the most common thing that I see, hands down, is that they only run a TSH level. That is actually not even a thyroid directly produced hormone. That actually is coming from the pituitary gland, which is a little bit higher up in the chain. So it's like the pituitary gland is about here, and then the thyroid is here. So what they're checking to see is like, is the pituitary gland actually communicating to the thyroid at all? And about 85% of the time, they well, first of all, the thyroid back to the TSH, that level, the range is so broad. It's usually from like 0.5 to 5. Well, no two people can feel the same if you're at 0.5 or 5. For optimal, like whenever I see, oh, that a red flag is when it's over 1.5. So if the TSH is over 1.5, that at least alarms me that we should do some further checking, but I never just check TSH. I always check multiple levels. And the antibodies that you were speaking about, um, I'll check those if someone is expressing a certain set of conditions and symptoms, which would make me think that they might have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is a condition in where the body is sensing that there is an invader, because we have to remember what the thyroid does first and foremost. It is like a sponge and a filter. So as the blood is pumping through the thyroid, which happens about every 15 to 20 minutes, all of the blood in your body is passing through the thyroid gland. And so if it is not able to function properly, it's not able to filter out pathogens. And so when that happens and there is an invader on board, a lot of times it's the Epstein-Barr virus, which we usually picked up somewhere in childhood, and it was better known as mono. So anytime somebody has expressed to me that they had mono as a young adult, a child, or even as an adult, we will always check for antibodies. Um, I've also seen post COVID that those antibodies have reactivated in a large, large number of the population,
Okay.
because viruses like to hang out together. And so it'll reactivate viruses that are dormant, because Epstein-Barr works very similarly to herpes virus, whereas it goes into dormancy when the body is well, and when the body is not well, like in COVID or in stress or in other peak times where your body is just at a disadvantage, that those antibodies will flare up. And so you can definitely have normal looking thyroid labs and still have positive antibodies. And I tell people, think of that as like a positive pregnancy test. So some people say, oh, my antibodies are really low, or my antibodies are super high. And I'm like, well, positive is positive.
Right.
So,
So speaking of that, how would someone know that maybe their thyroid is actually off? What symptoms are typically red flags?
yeah. So yeah, I think for women, a lot of times they just start to feel a sense of being overwhelmed. And that's usually one of the very first things people like, whenever you can kind of backtrack with women, or in men too, but it is more common in women. And part of the reason it's more common in women is because we have higher fat stores. And so we also as the general population, consume lower protein, which means we're getting lower amounts of iron. And so a lot of the things that feed the thyroid naturally, women are just naturally doing less of. And so they'll start to feel overwhelmed and they may have difficulty losing weight. They may start to have like forgetfulness or brain fog. They also complain of being cold hands and feet, maybe some heart palpitations or like feeling of anxiety. Often the outer third of the eyebrow will start to thin. So I'm like an eyebrow watcher in public. So if people are telling me stuff, and I'm like, let me check out your eyebrows. Because they'll start to thin. A lot of times their hair will start to thin as well. Sometimes women are told like that they have high cholesterol and they have a very clean diet. And that's because the thyroid gland is a master gland. The higher up, to the command center that a gland lies, the more power it has to communicate to everything downstream. So if your estrogen is off, your progesterone is off, your cholesterol is off, I always think let's take a talk to the thyroid for a minute because if that's one of your master glands, then it warrants checking. People usually have low body temperature with low thyroid as well. Low being under like 97.6. And so, you'll think, oh, my thyroid runs, my temperature runs a little low. And when that happens, think of everything slow and low. So that's typically how I describe thyroid symptoms. Everything feels slow or low, low energy, low libido, low hair growth, low digestion, like your digestion is just off. Maybe you get constipated easily. And in all of those cases, it's also a sign for us to check the liver because the liver is struggling if the thyroid is struggling. So I'm also a big proponent of not just rushing people onto thyroid medication because there are things that we can do to unburden the body or to support the body so that the thyroid will start to respond better. That's contrary to what doctors were doing 10 or 15 years ago. They were immediately putting people on a thyroid prescription and it it works. Your symptoms get better, but it inhibits your body from producing its own thyroid in the best optimal way because it wasn't really given all the supporting agents for the body to see if it could actually start producing more thyroid hormone all by itself.
Yes.
Um, so
So if they come in to you, then you would do a consultation to see,
mhm.
first of all, can I help you? And then maybe figure out a path forward of, okay, this is what we need to test, this is how we need to test, but let me sit down and actually hear about what you're struggling with and what your symptoms are and then create a path forward, right?
Yes, that is exactly right because very often, I just had two women last week that came to me with very similar concerns. And I feel very strongly, and it's two opposite ends of the spectrum. One is a teenager but has already gone through puberty, and one of them is a woman who's nearing the menopause age. So it's not specific. I'm seeing it in women of all ages. Another contributing factor for being in women is that during pregnancy, the baby uses the mom's thyroid hormone for most of that gestational period. So very, very often I will see like a young mom who has low thyroid symptoms. And that's when I was first diagnosed. After my sixth child that I was diagnosed with having low thyroid, but it wasn't before multiple OBGYNs and physicians just kept telling me I needed to be put on anti-anxiety meds. And especially when I told them I had a large family, they're like, oh, you must need anxiety meds. You must be overwhelmed by your daily family duties. And I'm like, yes, part of that is true. But I also don't believe I know my body. And that's one of the things that I would encourage everyone to listen to is the promptings of their own body and the promptings of that gut feeling because the body speaks to you in a way in which it wants to be healed. And so if something is just not feeling right for you, make sure you continue to just dig and persist. Be persistent.
Yes.
And it don't just settle for it. Your body is not deficient in anxiety meds. I can promise you that.
Amen.
Um, it's not.
Well, and also,
Usually,
you're not crazy if you feel like
no.
your emotions are all over the place. And I have had so many, because I had high thyroid struggles last year, and I'm still trying to figure things out. And so I've had several conversations with, NHN community and then friends that are like, I am not an anxious
Right.
person, but lately, I can't handle anything. Everything throws me off, and everyone just thinks I'm crazy. And I guess I'm just stressed out and I need to go to a retreat somewhere. And I'm like, nope, you need to get your thyroid checked. We we have a question.
Okay.
Uh the Sacred Nurse Fran has joined us, and she says she has had a few clients have EBV flare up
Mhm.
recently, and many more people being diagnosed with EBV. And she says EBV seems to be more common than not these days. I have clients who've had recurrences, reinfection, relapse.
100%. We used to think prior to COVID that we were able to eradicate EBV, like that it was something that you could just kill and destroy and just get rid of once and for all.
Which is
Like
what is EBV?
it is
Just for the person.
Epstein-Barr
Okay.
virus.
Yeah.
So think about that, what it is. It's not a bacteria, it is a virus.
Hmm.
So viruses by nature they have the ability to morph and change and adapt into new things. And so they are not killed by antibiotics. Viruses never have been, killed by
Right.
antibiotics. So they always have the ability to morph and change. But before COVID, myself included, was convinced that I had magically, well, not magically, but by lots of diligence through herbs and, detoxing the body, that Epstein-Barr could be eradicated, that it was completely gone from the body and you'd have to be reinfected for it to come back. We now know that that's not true, myself included. After I was down with a different virus, it reactivated. So basically, the Epstein-Barr virus, EBV, loves to hide out deep in the tissues. It can hide out in the brain. It can hide out in the thyroid, which is one of its absolute favorite places to just chill and hide out. It's super happy in there. I tell people it's kind of similar to like heavy metals. And heavy metals and Epstein-Barr actually go hand in hand. They feed off of each other. Candida, yeast, fungus, mold, they also feed off of each other. Um, Epstein-Barr virus favorite food is eggs. It likes one of the proteins that's in eggs. So, in general, for thyroid clients, when they're struggling with getting their thyroid back into a normal range, I will tell people to avoid eggs and gluten. Those are two very integral parts that I see in healing a thyroid, is that people avoid eggs and gluten. Even if you don't think you have a sensitivity to it, it's feeding usually that underlying virus. And so to get it to go back into remission, which is now we realize that it just needs to be remissed, much like the herpes virus. So our goal is to be able to check and see that those antibodies are back into like an undetectable range, or even just lower than they were, because we'll see sometimes those antibodies like off the charts, like off of the what the even the lab reads. And I'm like, oh gosh. And when Epstein-Barr reactivates, people will have all of their low thyroid symptoms, even if their labs look perfect. So completely perfect, and then you'll still have crushing fatigue, crushing brain fog, bloating. Everything is slowing down again, and the adrenals are taking a hit as well. So then our goal is to start supporting the body in its immune pattern, like giving it lots of vitamin C and zinc and selenium and all the good things that promote our body's ability to put that back into its place, to get it back into remission.
And some of those tests that you can run will tell you exactly how much
Yeah.
of these things this person might need, right? And what they
Yes.
need. Yeah. So you're not just guessing, you're actually,
Right.
assessing. So,
That's exactly
yeah.
right. It is an assessment, and I think that is one approach that I feel like is a little different for me than some other practitioners. Is that I do come from a traditional medical background, so while I appreciate their process, I have a new way of just utilizing it. But I do still like to see numbers, and I like to know where we stand, and I like to know measurably how much progress we are making.
Right.
So I do like to use testing in order to be able to measure and to be able to know what we're dealing with and what we're actually up against and fighting. Sometimes, that looks different. And so it is a boutique tailored approach with each particular client. So I don't have protocols. I have very tailored recommendations for each person that comes in, because we are all incredibly different and we all have a very different story as to how we may or may not have ended up with a thyroid deficiency. Um, and a lot of we talk about deficiency a lot. It's much more common to have a deficiency than to have an overabundance. But with Hashimoto's, like we talked about earlier, that's actually like the roller coaster. So one day somebody can feel low, and then the next day they have the symptoms of too high.
Yeah.
Um, and oftentimes, when people are medicated therapeutically for their thyroid, their labs will look like to a physician that they are hyperthyroid. And I can't tell you how many people come back and say, my doctor took me off my thyroid meds because he said I was getting too much. And my first question is, well, how do you feel now? And they're like, well, I feel horrible. That's why I'm back. And I'm like, yeah, because you actually weren't hyperthyroid. It's just looking at the labs in a different light, in a different perspective, and actually listening to the person and letting that settle where they actually feel good. But yes, we will look at what are the deficiencies. We will look at what are the toxicities, and try to correct those alongside with supporting the thyroid at the same time. Often, if it's a young person, um, they usually turn around incredibly quickly, and they rarely will ever go on to need thyroid medication. But if it's somebody who's been struggling for decades, um, I do usually end up seeing those guys needing a little bit more thyroid support than somebody who this is just starting out, like a new mom or even a teenager.
Hmm.
um, so it does vary. So I do think that the approach that we took 15 years ago, just putting everybody on thyroid medication, is definitely outdated.
Yes. Yeah. And there are other solutions,
Yes,
other options.
there are other options.
Thank you so much for sharing this insight. I think it was so helpful for me. The friend, the sacred nurse, I replied that you've taught her so much and it's so
Oh,
helpful. So I'm sure it will be. I know that a lot of our followers will be watching this back later. I'm also going to put this on our YouTube channel as we're here on Instagram, and then it will be a blog. So you get found in a lot of places,
okay.
and then it'll have a link over to your naturalhealthnetwork.org directory listing if you would like to connect with Wendy, because obviously she can help with answers if you haven't been able to find them. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And I'm happy to send anybody a copy of what their normal thyroid labs should look like and what the ranges should be. So that if you are seeing another practitioner and you want to know if you're in good range, I'd be happy to share that with you. So just reach out or comment or send messages, and we'll see about getting you guys that information.
Fantastic. Thank you so
You're so
much.
welcome.
Right. Have such a good day.
You
Talk to
too.
you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.